Okay, I'm a superhero. At least I used to think of myself that way a couple of years ago. When I was a child, I loved stories about superheroes. The idea that a single person with extraordinary abilities could deal with a bunch of villains, save the world, and solve the problem seemed very attractive to me. I wanted to be like them, strong, agile, invincible, single-handedly coping with the adversity. I didn't realize how superficial my idea of this concept was, and that it leads not to self-reliance, but to loneliness. I'm an academic teacher, and I would like to emphasize the word teacher here, as for many years I considered myself a lecturer, someone who imparts academic knowledge, someone with superpowers. And when he enters the university walls, he puts on a cape and dispels the darkness of ignorance by saying, "I am lecturer." I know how cringe that sounds. I know it now. But at the time, I was so focused on fighting the evils of ignorance that this pathos seemed justified. At the same time, I was this cool young doctor who took care of the students' club, travel youth students to the research, and helped organize various events. My superpowers were charisma, wit, and metaphors, thanks to which I could explain almost everything. Besides, I was not much older than my students, so it was easy for me to find a common language with them. However, every superhero has its own kryptonite, an Achilles heel or arch enemy who spends his sleep. And mine, it was about 7 years ago, turned out to be him. I don't remember in what context I used the Indiana Jones metaphor. I remember the overwhelming silence that took over the room. No one laughed. Perhaps my joke was lame. Perhaps. However, my students didn't know who Indiana Jones was. Therefore, they couldn't judge whether my joke was funny or not. I thought that something was wrong with them. But then I realized it's like expecting that 26 years from now, students will understand memes with Captain America and Iron Man created at the release of the Civil War movie. And having realized this, I felt old. However, this was not the worst of it. I had been losing contact with students for some time, and I didn't notice this. There were less obvious signs. As time passed, the language of pop culture metaphors, which were so useful to me, was shrinking more and more. And now, up to 100 students were in the room, and I felt alone. Losing my tool made my mission to fight ignorance increasingly frustrating. And my generational gap became increasingly apparent. I thought that students were to blame. In addition to ignorance, sloth, and plagiarism joined the gallery of supervillains. My critical attitude was sustained by conversation with other lecturers. The students were to blame. They weren't studying. They were taking the easy way out, they said. But nothing more came out from those conversations. Today, I think they were lonely too. They also didn't know how to resolve the problem. Besides, we are very often told that teaching is less important than research, and teaching becomes kind of unwanted duty. At the time, however, I felt I was alone in this. Because I couldn't deal with the villains, I became depressed. Now it was me who was to blame. I couldn't reach my students, so I was hopeless, and I used to do it. I grew increasingly tired of my methods for fighting evil, specifically the lecture. The repetitiveness of the content, even when refreshing different aspects of it. Speaking to a room when you are often answered by an echo caused me to lose the faith in the meaning of it all. After all, the standard tactic for the exam is to pass and forget, which is supported by the research. Students forget up to 80% of unfixed knowledge from the lectures, and there is no room for the needed repetition. We go from the topic to topic. At the same time, the attention of students in their classes is limited to 35 minutes, with 20 minutes in the middle and 15 minutes at the end. I don't remember when my attitude started to change. It was a process. Unlike lecture, much satisfaction came from the conversation classes. Students very often performed better in such class format than in the lecture. Besides, it gave me some space to experiment. What could I lose? Some things were out, some didn't. But it gave me a fuel to approach the problem methodically. Superpowers are very often only an addition to superheroes' much more valuable skills. Batman has an analytical mind, and he is a great detective, and Superman is empathetic and brings hope. So let's start methodically by defining the goal. I generally consider it to be to teach students something. I abandoned the concept of imparting the knowledge as this limited the possibilities. Then I needed to know who should I teach. Yes, students, but who are they? Not what my idea of them is based on anecdotal evidence, but what I know about the generation of students I am supposed to teach. I teach Generation Z, at least for now. What emerges from the research is the picture of people who are active, open to new technologies, empathetic, self-reliant, but also value cooperation, proficiency, and above all, feedback from those giving them tasks to do. This contradicted with the traditional lecture. In some cases, lecture is still valuable, especially when we consider to acquiring general knowledge. However, with specific issues, active methods are praised much more by the students and very often as well by the lecturers. Besides, in the situation when we can implement a lecture in the form of the online recording, which students can listen to at any time and repeatedly, face-to-face meetings in the classroom can be used much more constructively. Besides, perhaps it's better to equip students in tools and skills which allow them to acquire the knowledge on their own. Tools and skills which are essentially universal and will be helpful in their future work. The lecture has another problem. It puts too much attention at the lecturer. Teaching successes and failures are teachers' successes and failures. Teacher can be a bumbling megalomaniac demanding attention, or a frustrated belfry. Still, in both extreme cases, this is at least partially due to the center of gravity being placed on the teacher, while in the classroom, students are more important. This brought me to the notion that my students should work in teams to solve a specific problem during the whole semester. And all of that should be framed in the multifaceted project with the increasing level of difficulty in which each student has its own task, but at the same time is a part of the larger whole. The most challenging was to give students back their casuality and allow them making mistakes. However, in my role as a guide, I could give them respond and the feedback on the ongoing basis, rewarding activity without waiting until the evaluation and until the end of the semester. I'm still using some elements of the lecture, for example, to introduce students into the subject matter. However, but giving them more influence, I've gained openness, freedom, dynamics, and more interest and commitment in the topic and the classes, and my students become experts in their own projects. Thus, I consciously abandoned the role of a superhero, and I put myself in the role who Papa Kent was for Superman, or Alfred for Batman. I realized that my strengths weren't idealized superpowers, but my personal attributes. And it doesn't make me feel old anymore. Not all of us have to opt my method. Not all of us have to abandon the role of a superhero. It can be retained, and then students become our sidekicks. What is essential is that the methods we use should focus on students and be tailored to our own temperaments and abilities, as our confidence is crucial to how we work with students, our comfort level. As you see, you are not alone in your struggles. Academic teaching conferences welcome numerous teachers like you and I. Most have felt alone somewhere along the way. What unites us is our desire to respond to the needs of our students and enjoy our work. You are not alone. You can be superheroes, their sidekicks, guides who will offer advice and help by allowing students making mistakes they will learn from, and then they can choose the role they want to play. They will struggle, but trust them. They will handle it. Why? Because they have you. They are not alone. You are not alone. And we are not alone. Thank you very much.